the Athletic Football Show.
Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me tonight is my good friend Derrik Klassen. Derrik, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Feels like just a weird week in the NFL. I mean, the time change is different for everybody. Like, it was kind of a weird come down week after last week was completely insane. So, like, I feel like in a trance is the best way I could describe this week.
I was a mess today. I'm on Mountain Time right now. So I'm on Mountain Time. It was daylight savings time. The last game in the late slate went like 45 minutes later than it was supposed to. I have no idea what time it is, and I have no idea what's going on. And I think that was pretty fitting for some of the unsettling football that we got to watch today.
Yeah, I forgot that you were on like the double time duty, which is a tough way to live, especially on an NFL Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I did this to myself. I don't need any sympathy from anybody else, but I'll be back hopefully in my normal zone over the course of the next week. But it was definitely a little bit disorienting, and a day full of stuff that was a little bit disorienting. Sometimes we kick off the show with a performance, something that really stood out, or a game that we thought carried particular weight from that week. We're not going to do that today because I don't think any one game really stood out that way. When I was watching today's slate unfold and I watched a couple of the performances, one of the things that really started to hit me was I think we're figuring out who the really good teams are in the NFL. One of those teams, it's just a mindless winning machine, is going to play tomorrow night against the Bucs, and that team just continues to eat up everything in its path. And there's a reason the Chiefs are the Chiefs. We know about them. But today we did see some teams that I feel like, all right, they're really settling in. They feel like they're putting some distance between them and everybody else in their respective conferences. And there are two performances that really stood out to me in that regard. And then there's a third team that we can talk about. I think the Ravens and the Lions feel like those sorts of teams right now. And that Baltimore performance on offense today, I think we could talk about why it puts them in a slightly different place. And I think now with the Bills being 7-2 and essentially walking away with the AFC East, you can probably throw them on that pile too. But that was pretty much my biggest takeaway from today. I don't know how you felt watching those teams.
That is exactly how I felt. I kind of came into this week believing that there were, to me, 5 very good teams, which is obviously the Chiefs, who will probably win on Monday night. The Ravens, even though we still had some questions about their defense, the Lions, the Bills, and then the Packers. The Lions beat the hell out of one of those other teams that I just said. Obviously, the Packers kind of had some of their own issues with Jordan Love not being fully healthy and the defense missing a couple of guys, but the Lions went out and handled business. And then the Ravens. This Denver defense legitimately was, you could make a case that they were the best defense in the league to this point. And the Ravens went out and smacked them for 4 quarters. Run game, pass game, didn't matter. Got every single thing that they want. For them to do that, it just felt like, okay, the Ravens have had these good games. They're putting up all these numbers. For them to go and do it against what has maybe been the best defense to this point in the season, I'm so bought in on where this team is going.
It was absolutely crazy for Lamar to have that sort of game against a team that was number 1 in the league in EPA per dropback coming into this game. They were number 1 in the NFL on defense, the Broncos were. And I believe Lamar averaged 0.91 per EPA per dropback in this game. That's absolutely insane. The number that really jumped out to me, the Broncos didn't play a lot of man coverage in this game. And typically they'll lean into some man coverage. And I understand why teams are a little bit hesitant to play it against the Ravens because they're worried about what Lamar can do with his legs. Lamar wasn't very good against man today. I mean, it was pretty average. Against zone looks in this game, Lamar Jackson finishes 13 for 15 for 260 yards. If you're doing the math at home, that is a cool 17.3 yards per attempt.
They were getting some chunks. And like the Broncos weren't even necessarily, they didn't even in some instances have like the wrong answers for what you should be doing in zone. Like one of the big plays that Zay Flowers hits, where I think it's the touchdown right before the half, they're running like cover 2 to his side over the top of him. So you should think, oh, we're safe. But they're running switch verticals and like a corner route runs the deep safety off. Zay just gets up right through the seam and is able to do whatever he wants. And so like, even when the Broncos thought they were safe and thought they had the right answer to like, we're not going to give the most explosive passing offense an explosive pass, they still give it up. And Todd Monken still flies away and Lamar Jackson still makes the throw. Like the way this offense is operating, it is truly like one of, in terms of the passing offense, what they're doing on a down-to-down basis, it's legitimately one of the best passing offenses we've seen in a decade to this point.
Yeah. I mean, just in terms of efficiency, the numbers are crazy. We talked about it coming into the week. They're averaging, I think, 7.1 yards per play, which is one of the best marks that we've seen in the last 20 years. It's up there with some of the best offenses ever. They were at 7.3 yards per play today against a defense that has been objectively good most of the season.
Right.
And that throw you're talking about, Zay, Lamar layers that ball over the linebacker who's trying to get his hand up to get it. And that's the problem with this team. That huge touchdown to Zay, and then there was another big chunk to Zay earlier, even on that drive or on the previous drive. Both of those are just out of super heavy personnel play action. And that's what this team is doing to you. They can really do whatever they want. They can run the ball out of any personnel grouping. And when they line up with those heavy personnel sets on early downs, and they try to take some of these chunk shots out of play action, what are you going to do? Because you're so worried about having to stop the run, and then they're just gashing you behind the linebackers on these 25, 30-yard chunk plays. They are such a problem right now, and I think a huge reason for that is just the way that Lamar is playing. We've alluded to this, the fact that this is probably the best version of him we've ever seen, but right now he's playing like the best quarterback in the NFL down to down. And even as he's won MVPs, I don't think that was the case. I don't think he was playing better quarterback down to down than Josh Allen was last year or than some other guys have in the past. But right now he is. I mean, there was a play, I can't remember which throw it was. I think it was at one point in the game where John Franklin Myers was coming unblocked at him. It was actually the chunk to Zay off of play action. And it was right before they hit the wheel route to Justice Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Franklin Myers is coming at him on a stunt, and he has to just sidestep him a tiny bit and throw the ball around him for that chunk play to Zay Flowers. And it's like, Jesus, man. Like, the fact that he's doing all of this little subtle stuff in combination with the spectacular things we see from that offense, it just makes them such a dangerous beast right now.
And doesn't it feel like right now when he moves in the pocket, he'll make one guy miss, and then it feels like the game immediately slows back down for him. Like, he isn't going into do I need to run? Do I need where's my check down? It feels like he makes the guy miss and immediately time slows back down and he's fully back into all right, what's the next thing? And I think that's a big reason why he's been able to play the way that he's playing so far. I went and looked up his EPA per dropback numbers through 9 weeks since 2011. Lamar Jackson has the 5th best EPA per dropback at 0.35. The guy's ahead of him. 2016 Tom Brady, who granted only played 4 games, but he was in the MVP conversation and then beat the actual MVP in the Super Bowl. You have 2011 Rodgers, one of the best seasons we've seen in my lifetime. 2018 Mahomes, which was obviously an incredible thing. And then 2013 Peyton Manning. Those are the only guys ahead of him over the last since 2011. That is the level that he's playing at. This isn't us doing the thing of Lamar Jackson's playing really well and it's October and he's doing it all again. No, he is legitimately one of the most productive passers we've seen in over a decade.
And you combine that with what Zay Flowers is turning into, the fact that they have Derrick Henry, and this team is a wagon in a way that they just have not been offensively in any year that we've talked about the Lamar-led Ravens. Even in 2019, where they were efficient offense in the league, they were less flexible than this. There were fewer ways that they could beat you. And I think that's what makes them so scary. And I think that conversation extends in a way to what the Lions are. Now, the Lions didn't play the cleanest game today. They didn't run all over the Packers. It wasn't a hugely efficient day. The weather was bad, etc. But this is just, to me, like a perfect encapsulation of who the Lions are. They have a 4th and 6 with 15 minutes left in the second quarter, the beginning of the second quarter. They have it's a 3rd and 6. They run the ball on 3rd down, and then they get to that 4th and 6. They come out on that 4th and 6, and they just do all this bells and whistles bullshit to try to get the Packers to jump. The Packers jump on 4th and 6. And even as the play clock was ticking down, I know they weren't going to take a timeout there because I'm sure they were comfortable taking the delay because it would have been a chip shot field goal the same way it would have been if you hadn't taken the delay. So they go, because they know they have nothing to lose by doing this, they go try to get the Packers to jump. They get the Packers to jump, and on the next play, they hit the 4th and 1 touchdown to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And it's okay, this is what this team is. They are just going to do all these little things better than you do, and you extend to the talent that they have, the explosiveness they have on offense. So now it's 7-0. Then you have the Kirby Joseph interception return for a touchdown. So now you're down 14 to whatever. They come out at the half. First play, they run this beautiful little screen to Amon-Ra St. Brown on the first play of the half. They get 11 yards. Same drive, 18-yard chunk to Jahmyr Gibbs. Just gorgeous zone blocking. The cutoff block by Decker's gorgeous. Ragnow displaces the nose. Glasgow gets up on the linebacker. Same drive, 4th and 1, 15 yards. Sewell crushes the right side of the offensive line. Gibbs scores a touchdown. Now it's 24-3 and the game is over. You felt like you had a chance. You felt like the game was close, but because they converted a bullshit 4th and 1 and then another one 2 drives later, you're now down by 3 touchdowns at the start of the third quarter, and there's nothing else you can do. They just suffocate these teams. Even on days where they're not necessarily clicking on all cylinders, you wake up and they're up by 2 or 3 scores by the time we're halfway through the third quarter and the game is already over.
Yes, that is the perfect encapsulation of this team. They're always stronger than you. Like, they can bully you when they want to. They're usually cleaner. Like, they don't make as many mistakes. Outside of, the corners maybe being a little grabby, they don't have that many penalties. And then all the little things that you mentioned, like, that 4th and 6 where they get them to jump and stuff like that. That to me was also the biggest difference between a team like the Lions and a team like the Packers. I think the Packers are a very good football team, but they just made more mistakes today. You have the Jordan Love throwing the weird pick 6. You have on the 4th and 1 you mentioned, like, they clearly mess up that fit. I think McKinney overruns his fit and is supposed to fall back, and he doesn't. And Gibbs is able to spring for a touchdown. You have Green Bay dropping a number of passes, and I know the weather plays a factor in that, but like, the Lions weren't really dropping passes. And
so the weather is the same for both teams.
Exactly. Right. And so this to me was just a game where it's like, all right, you see what it looks like when one team is clearly just a little bit more mature than the other one. And that's what it really felt like with this Lions team. Another thing I want to add to that too is, like, I think 2 years ago, there are 2 factors where if they happened to the Lions, they would have absolutely lost this game. First of all, it's a wet game outside for Jared Goff. 2 years ago, instant loss. Like, they lose that game, and I have no doubt about it. And then the other thing, Brian Branch gets ejected in the first half of this game. I think if you told me 2 years ago, the Lions' second best defender, and currently their best defender with Aiden Hutchinson off the field, gets ejected in the first half, I would be like, oh, they lose that game. But both of those things happened, and they didn't lose that game. And in fact, they won it pretty handily. Like, this to me so clearly feels like a very different Lions team than I've ever really been used to.
Yeah, I think they have so many paths to victory. They have so many ways to hurt you. And I think that today was a really good example of that. Beller dropped this stat into our rundown doc, and I still don't believe that it's true. Over the last 6 games, the Lions have scored more touchdowns than they have thrown incomplete passes. They have 26 touchdowns and 24 incompletions. That's an offense that I think is in a good spot. It's doing pretty well.
You know why I actually do believe that? I think I saw on the broadcast, this is Goff's 4th game this season that he started with at least 10 straight completions.
It was 11 for 11, I think, in this game.
It's crazy. How does he keep doing this?
They are just, again, it's an offense that I think understands exactly what it's trying to accomplish all the time. I think that's why it's so fun to watch. And again, you want to throw the Bills in there. It's another team that I think is playing really well offensively. We'll talk about that game a little bit later. So I think you have a solidified group of teams at the top, and I think today was another expression of that. On the flip side, and we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but I think it's an interesting counterpoint to the good teams that we're starting to see develop and stand out. There are an unusual amount of very bad teams this year. Like, if you look at the standings, there are 9 teams that are 2-6 or 2-7. Some of them we expect. The Panthers are in there. The Giants are in there. The Raiders are in there. The Titans are in there. But then we have some of these other teams that just have had seasons from hell that have joined them. The Dolphins are in there. The Jags are in there. The Saints are in there. So we have this huge collection of teams. I mean, a third of the league, essentially, we're pretty much at Halloween. If everyone was celebrating Halloween all weekend, so I'm just going to say we're still at Halloween as we're making determinations about the NFL season. We're at Halloween. You can ignore a third of the NFL. That's wild. I just don't remember it being quite that distinct, but that's the way that it feels right now.
Yeah, I mean, the only team that I think was supposed to be trash and hasn't been trash is Washington, right? Like, they've been like the one, okay, they have somehow jumped themselves out of that category, which I think has been super impressive. But otherwise, all the teams that were kind of supposed to be bad have been bad. And then a number of teams, like you mentioned, that were mediocre or at least had a shot at the playoffs have just completely, like, their season is over. And like with the Dolphins, some of that's not your fault. Like, Tua gets hurt for a few weeks and like your offense just craters for a little bit. I mean, that's maybe a different discussion for a different day.
We'll have that discussion in 20 minutes.
Yeah, for a different segment is how I should probably phrase that. The Saints is probably the most confusing because I know there wasn't a lot of reason for optimism, but for it to fall apart quite as drastically as it has, I think is pretty insane to me. But for there to only be like one surprise good team and then a lot of surprise really bad teams it just feels like there's no middle class in the NFL the way that I think there have been in other seasons.
There kind of is a middle class in the NFL, but even the middle class in the NFL is weird. Like, we're going to talk about the Chargers in a bit. The Chargers are the middle class of the NFL. The Cardinals are I think the Cardinals are a team that we expected to be this sort of team, right? I think the Cardinals are 5-4 through 9 weeks. Like, all right, I think we expected the Cardinals to be this sort of team. Everyone else in the middle class, like the Rams are this weird team lingering around the middle. The Bengals are this weird team lingering around the middle. So a lot of what's happened with the distribution of teams in the standings right now, I think has snuck up on us in sort of a weird way. Speaking of the Saints, just throwing this out there right now, there are a couple games we're not going to talk about today. Because it was not in my field of vision watching games in Denver today, and because I care about myself, I did not watch Panthers Saints, and we are not going to talk about that game. And we're also not going to hit on the Sunday night game, doing all the prep during that game. I think a lot to dig into with the Sam Darnold performance and what we saw from the Joe Flacco-led Colts offense, which was just as bad as the Colts offense has been at any point this year. But just so you guys know, we're not going to hit those, but we are going to hit most of the other ones, and that's going to start in earnest here with You Have My Attention.
Gentlemen, you had my curiosity. Now you have my attention.
We've been dancing around this a little bit. You know, we talked about the defense on the preview show. You've been poking me about Justin Herbert, which I'm open to Justin Herbert love, by the way. People,
I know.
Very strange. I don't understand like some of the comments we've gotten. But this was the first game, I think, that we can really lean into this because of what they played like on both sides of the ball and what this looked like against a Browns team that actually showed some life last week against the Ravens. The Chargers are now 5-3 with their 27-10 win over the Browns, doing some stuff worth paying attention to on both sides of the ball. So the Los Angeles Chargers, the firmly in the wild card race Los Angeles Chargers, you guys have my attention.
They really do. And they have my attention in the exact way that, like, if I painted the picture for how they would have my attention coming into the season, it's exactly this, right? Where like the defense kind of comes together the way that we think they would. Justin Herbert is playing out of his mind. The run game looks a little bit better. And overall, it just feels like a well-coached, mature team. Like, they still have some individual screw-ups, right? Like Quentin Johnston not getting his head around on a back shoulder ball that he probably should catch. Just little stuff like that, or like drops here and there.
The best throw that Justin Herbert made today, by the way,
yes,
was that back shoulder hole shot to Quentin Johnston that should have been caught. A day where he had many plays we're talking about, I still think that was the best throw that Justin Herbert had today.
It was, and it's a shame that that one actually gets dropped. So like they still have some of these individual errors, right? And like the interior of the line's not great, but in terms of getting the most out of all of their players, they really are on both sides of the ball. And I think that's obviously true with some of the pass catchers that Justin Herbert is getting decent production out of. But then some of the names that you see make plays on the defense this week, I thought was insane. Like Deion Henley, I think on the first or second drive, sinks under a bender, almost intercepts a pass. Tareeb Still, who is a rookie 5th round pick, tipped up an interception for one of his other, I think for a safety in the end zone. And then later in the game,
Elijah Molden, I think, was the one who ended up picking it off. Yeah, for Elijah Molden. And then later in the game, he's playing outside leverage on a dig route, and immediately as soon as the receiver goes in, he just drives under it and picks it off. And it's like 2 months ago, we didn't know who any of these guys were, if they would be anything for this team. And now they're making huge plays in games. And it's just like the fact that they are getting that from their defense. And then you still have guys like Mac playing at a high level. It's coming together in a way I just didn't expect that this quickly. The Tareeb Still tip for the interception was a fantastic play. And I just love that these guys are never covering grass, ever. Yes. They're always aware situationally of where they have to be. When you watch the depth that all these guys get in coverage, even if it's like a cover 2 corner, if it's 3rd and 10, I don't give a shit if you're sitting there 2 yards off the ball in the flat. I'm going to get some depth and make this a little bit harder for these quarterbacks who are having to try to hit a hole shot in 3rd and 10. They're consistently constricting those lanes when they're defending the pass. And that Deion Henley play that you pointed out is a perfect example. Like, he gets so much depth there and just gets one hand. That's not a bad ball by Jameis. It's actually a good ball by Jameis. It's a fantastic play by Henley. That was like at the 5:30 mark of the first quarter. And I believe it was on a 3rd down, and that short circuits a drive. And you're just having all of these contributions. Morgan Fox had some moments as a pass rusher today. He had a sack on an inside move in the first quarter. Khalil Mack had a disgusting sack on an inside move at one point. The defense overall just played really well and cohesively in the way that we've seen from them. Coming into Sunday Night Football, Jameis had the 2nd worst EPA per dropback of any quarterback this week after what he did against the Ravens last week. So we want to see, and the Browns aren't the best offense in the league. We know this, but we want to see the Chargers kind of stack up these performances against not bottom 3 offenses. So to see them do this against the team that really did show some life last week against the Ravens, that's really nice. And then you combine that with the quarterback that, listen, the offense isn't good. Okay. They had a 30% success rate today. He was pressured on 53% of his dropbacks. He was running for his life the entire game, but he's still going to be able to make 3, 4, 5 throws over the course of the game that make this team intriguing at the least, dangerous at the most. And that's why I think that even if they're incomplete and even if there's a lot to be desired with where this team is in its build, which we knew going into the season, there's still a lot to like about what they look like right now.
Oh, yeah. I'm not going to call this a good offense, but the quarterback is making it.
It's a bad offense.
Yeah,
but the quarterback
right.
is saving them.
He's making it as good as it possibly can be. And honestly, the formula that they have, I think is probably good enough to get them into the wild card, where if your defense can continue to play at a top 5 level and they're really not giving up that many explosives, where on the other side, like you said, 3 or 4 throws a game from Herbert where he just does something absolutely nuclear and instantly puts you into at least field goal range and you can get some points out of the drive. That is not like the best and most comfortable way to win games, but it is probably going to win you a game, especially in an AFC that really outside of like 2 or 3 teams. How many do you really feel that good about? Like,
I'm just looking at the numbers from today. I didn't see this. We started talking about it. They had 13 first downs. The Chargers did.
That's it?
13 first downs.
I mean, now that I think about it,
it helps when you're scoring touchdowns on 3rd and 21, where the Denzel Ward just leaves Josh Palmer on that play, but Herbert still has to make the throw. And then the 66-yard touchdown to Quentin Johnston, I believe it's 3rd down. He has to reset in the pocket. Herbert does after getting a little bit of pressure, slides to his right, puts his foot in the ground and throws a 40. I looked at the air yards. It was 48 yards in the air. It's a missile whole shot to Quentin Johnston for a touchdown. In this game, a couple of those coin flip plays where your quarterback's a superhero, that ended up being enough. Whether it's going to matter when they play real teams in the playoffs, if they get there, that's an entirely different conversation. But I'm at least interested in what the Chargers look like right now.
Yeah, I think among the scrappy potential wildcard teams, I at least want this. When you have very good defense, cool quarterback, that's enough for a wildcard bid. I'll watch that on wildcard weekend.
All right, so we're looking at the AFC standings right now. The Chargers are 5-3. The Broncos are 5-4. And man, it's hard not to feel pretty good about them, right? Like, there's going to be no wildcard team from the AFC East. Okay, in the AFC North, we're going to get at least one. Right, the Steelers or the Ravens are going to get one of the wildcards, so that's one. In the AFC South, not feeling super good about the Colts. And so it really does feel like the Chargers have the inside track to one of these. Is there any team in that middle class, that non-existent middle class that we were just talking about in the AFC that you definitively feel better about right now than the Denver Broncos, or excuse me, than the Los Angeles Chargers?
No, because what I was going to say too is that of all the non-division leaders in the AFC, if you were to just look at each side of the ball, like offense and defense, like which each individual unit do you feel best about? To me, it's probably the Chargers defense. Like outside of all the division leading teams, it's probably Chargers defense. And then again, like you said, they probably to me have the best quarterback of all the teams that aren't leading their division. So they're in a pretty good spot.
Let's get to our next one here. I want to be very clear about this entry into You Have My Attention. It's Joe Burrow, and it is only Joe Burrow. It is none of the other Bengals, because I'm not doing this. I am not going to get excited about the Bengals as a team. And I'm not going to do they're 4-5. Look at the AFC wildcard picture. That's fine. If we want to do that 3 or 4 weeks from now, we can do that 3 or 4 weeks from now. I'm not going to let myself go back down that road after beating a team that did 2 notable things today, the Las Vegas Raiders. One, they yanked Gardner Minshew to play Desmond Ridder. Not injury related. This is a performance thing. A quarterback that they just signed, that's the decision that they made. And then after this game, they fired Luke Getsy. That just happened, according to Tom Pelissero. So
I was about to say, I did not even realize that before we started.
Luke Getsy is out as the offensive coordinator for the Raiders. You came into the season. You made these choices. So the state of the Raiders right now, I'm not going to get overly excited about a team-specific performance against this version of the Raiders. I will, however, get excited about a performance like this from Joe Burrow, because in my opinion, this is a continuation in a couple specific areas of things that he's been doing this year that I find particularly exciting. And the thing that I think really jumped out today is his ability to continue making plays off schedule and trying to create a little bit, whether it's buying a little bit more time in the pocket, whether it's making plays outside of the pocket. That to me has been one of the biggest strengths of his all year in what has been a very nice season for Joe Burrow, even if the Bengals as a team have been struggling a little bit.
It to me has been the only thing that's kept this offense afloat is those 2 or 3 plays outside of the pocket that Joe Burrow makes a game. I mean, you can go back and watch any of their games, whether it's their wins or some of their close losses, the 3 plays that Burrow gets out of the pocket and maybe he throws a deep ball to Chase or it's some weird 3rd down conversion. Like those are the only plays that are keeping this thing alive. Cause like the run game, hit or miss, depending on the week. They were actually good today, but again, Raiders team is not that good. But it's mostly Joe Burrow having these big time explosive plays. And for him to be doing it without T. Higgins in some of these spots, it's incredibly impressive. Like I think today, especially, my only thought watching this game was this is full on LSU Joe Burrow. Like it is fully the LSU offense where it's like, all right, it's going to be a bunch of quick games. We're going to have well-timed RPOs. And then Joe Burrow is going to make 5 insane throws outside of the pocket, many of them in the red zone, and many of them were in the red zone today. And so that's, again, I still don't know if that's the most consistent formula for success, but if he specifically is going to play at this high of a level, maybe it is. Maybe it is enough.
Most every single one of his touchdowns today, he's making a play outside of the pocket and having to extend. First one to Chase Brown, rolls to his right, finds Chase. Great play by Chase Brown, by the way. Really good awareness to get to the back corner, knowing that he's rolling out. It helps when your running back runs like a 4-3 and he can get over there. But that was a really nice play by both of those guys. The 4th and 3 that he had to Tanner Hudson, where he has to slide to the left and up in the pocket to make that little sidearm throw, that's a beautiful play. The touchdown to Yoshivas, he's having to slide to his right, goes back across his body. That was beautiful. I mean, just he's doing that stuff consistently, and watching him, make some of those plays. You know what Chase is going to be. When Higgins gets back, there's still enough with this offense that makes them exciting. But I think this version of Burrow is really, like you said, it is what has kept them afloat a little bit, and it's just something that feels a little bit different than what we've seen from him in the past. And I think I don't know if elevate is the right word. We've seen Joe Burrow play really good football, but it just feels a little different. And it just feels like it's given them a little something that this offense may have lacked at other times when we've seen them really thriving.
Right. I think there were maybe at previous points when Joe Burrow was the most explosive passer in the league, there was a little bit more of it where it was just like, wow, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are really.
Yes.
And there were still some elements of like, okay, Joe Burrow would still go make a play outside of the pocket. It would maybe be like once or twice a game and you'd be like, okay, that's nice. And then a lot of it would just be chucking deep balls. Right now, it truly feels like he makes 5 or 6 plays a game where everything is on him to go make something happen. And he does. And then you add that on top of the fact that I do think he's actually just playing really well within the system when he's allowed to right now. Like there was a seam ball he threw in this game where he just goes 1, 2, 3, boom, ball is out, and like layers it right over the linebacker and fits it in right before the safety can get over. And so for him to be playing as efficiently as he is within the offense, I mean, he started 15 of 15 in this game and didn't have an incompletion until Max Crosby got his hands on an RPO pass. And like that was his first incompletion. And then the throw right after that was a drop. Like that is the level that he's playing at within structure. And then you add the out of structure stuff. So if he can continue to do that, get T. Higgins fully, but like if he could be back in the fold, this offense does have something.
Was the seam ball that went to Eric All early in the second half? I love that play. They were an empty, and it was like a little slant flat seam. And so just like the stress you're putting on the defense on that side, and Burrow gets to it so quickly, it was like a 20-yard chunk. And they were just hitting a lot of those today. So Joe Burrow, only Joe Burrow, because I want to be clear about this. You have my attention after that performance today. Some other games grabbed my attention in a very bad way, most of them in the late slate. We're going to get to all of those now. It's time for What the Fuck.
What the
The late slate of games today, what the 2 to 225 slate of games, we could put any of them in here. Okay, we're going to talk about some of the Nick Sirianni decisions a little bit later. So the Eagles, because they have some real superstar players, did not rise to the level to warrant mention in this segment. 2 teams from the other games absolutely did. And let's start with the Chicago Bears. Bears lose 29-9 to the Cardinals, and they have a schedule in the back half of the season that's absolutely brutal. And so the fact that they've dropped these last two, their outlook for the year has definitely shifted. But I said this after the game today, and I truly believe it. No matter what sort of losing streaks they went on previously with Matt Eberflus, they have the number 1 pick in the draft. It doesn't matter when you have no expectations. You can lose all the games you want when you have no expectations. To come out and play this way, after the way that last week ended and all of this consternation about culture and how the locker room feels and where they're going to go after that moment, to lay an egg like this against this Cardinals team and especially against this Cardinals defense, what the fuck? What was that today?
That was there are so many different angles. I'll get to the culture, we're the team that's all put together stuff in a minute. I want to start with something that Ben Solak tweeted via Next Gen Stats. 16 different Cardinals defenders registered a pressure today. 16 individual players, which is the most in a game since 2018. And Caleb was pressured on 46% of his dropbacks overall. There were definitely a handful of them that were just his fault. He's holding the ball a little bit too long. But when you are pressured on basically half of your dropbacks and more than the allotted 11 starters are getting pressures on you, it's crazy. Like, this is obviously a Cardinals defense that we know to be not very good, and they are still beating all of your protection rules. Your backs aren't getting where they need to be in pass protection, and you just don't have that many good check down options. And then you add that on top of Caleb missing a few throws. That's how you end up basically laying an egg against one of the worst defenses in the league right now.
My issue here, so he was blitzed on 26% of his dropbacks today. It was 4 of 11 on those plays. It wasn't very good. The issue is they didn't have the blitz to be doing that. If you look at who got those pressures, it's 2 for Mac Wilson. It's 2 for Kaiser White. It's 2 for every single second or third level defender that blitzed. They're sending all of these simulated pressures where they're only bringing 4 and they're dropping guys out. And the Bears have absolutely no idea how to handle any of that shit. The safety, that's exactly what happens on the safety, where they leave the back on essentially an unblocked second level defender, even though they're only bringing 4. And then I think the play before that, the drive before that, where it ended on a sack, it was another simulated pressure that they couldn't pick up. Their pressure plan in general is absolutely garbage. I know that they're missing the starting left tackle in this game. I know that Darnell Wright eventually did get hurt in this game. That's not what this is about. This is about a team that is completely ill-prepared for how to handle some of these funky looks. And this goes back a while. Washington did this to them in the Jags game. The Jags, even though the Bears were rolling, had some success on these simulated pressures. It is inexcusable to have this little of a plan and have so little of this buttoned up when it's been such a problem for you over the last few weeks. That's the offense. And you mentioned Caleb doing this to himself. He did not play well again today. The play that I just cannot get out of my head, the sack he takes on 1st and 10 from the plus 38 at the end of, I think, the first quarter is disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, there's just absolutely, you can't do it. Like, it's totally indefensible. The check down is sitting right there for him to throw the ball to, and he just doesn't do it. And the funniest part about it, they almost overcame it on that set of downs, and then Keenan Allen drops a 3rd and 8 that should have gone for a first down. So just everything about the offense was just gross today.
That's the thing that I want to stress about this. Caleb did not play well today, and he missed a number of throws that he just shouldn't be missing, like, flatly. But then you add that on top of the fact that, like, there is no margin for error in this offense for him. And
0.
It feels like some weeks it's like totally 0. They're like, there was that few week stretch there, week 4 to 6 or whatever, where they were playing okay. But when they're bad and it looks like this, there's literally 0 room for him to mess up. And he's a rookie. He's like a 21, 22-year-old rookie. He's going to mess up, and he's going to have games that look like this. And so, like, when you add both of those factors together, again, that's how you get a game where you scored 9 points against one of the worst defenses in the league.
We wouldn't be having this discussion if that was the only problem with the Bears' performance today, because this is what it's looked like at times this season, where the offense has really struggled, but the defense, Matt Eberflus's defense, right? That's why Matt Eberflus is here, because of what the defense did in the second half of last year.
I can hear you becoming the Joker in the like.
Matt, that's why Matt Eberflus is here, because the defense, right? The defense played really well in the second half of last year. The defense was really good for the first half of this season. What the Cardinals did to them on the ground today. Kyler did nothing today.
Right, that's the craziest part.
Kyler had one of the worst games of any quarterback in the league when you look at the stats today, and it didn't fucking matter. It didn't matter. Over the first 3 quarters in this game, The Cardinals averaged 0.48 EPA per rush. For context,
That's outrageous.
that is double an average Josh Allen dropback from this season. That's what the Cardinals were doing on the ground. It was unbelievable. We're talking about is 10, 12, 11, 8, 15, 8 over and over again. And the Cardinals run game is a beast to deal with. I mean, they're throwing tons of shit at you. And I actually liked one thing specifically in terms of schematically today, design-wise. They were running these looks where it would be 12 personnel and they would have both receivers split out to the left and they'd be in these like Y wing sets. And you had Jack Sanborn walked out over Marvin Harrison in those looks. And so you had a linebacker walked out of the box and they're just getting gashed in those looks. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter if it was gap scheme runs. It didn't matter if it was zone runs. It did not matter. The Cardinals did whatever they wanted today. The nadir of this is a third down run at the end of the first half where they give up a 60-yard touchdown. I could not believe it in real time. I said it was a draw when I saw it happen because I thought it was just a give up draw. It was just a run play. They were running the ball to end the half and they give up a touchdown to essentially put the game out of reach. It was unbelievable.
It was that center play side guard pull that they run like a million times a game. And what happened was the Bears fire the nickel. And so they fire him and he like ends up hitting outside of where the two pullers are. DeMarcado, who is the running back, sees that and goes, oh, all right, I'll just hit it up the hash right behind my two pullers. And he's just gone because the Bears are in a too high look. So there's a ton of space once that slot corner misses and he's not in the picture anymore. And DeMarcado he's gone. And it's like to give up that play, by the way, a reason that this afternoon slate felt so weird. I'm pretty sure all of these games had like a weird, bizarre touchdown right before the half. The Eagles also got like a 3rd and 17 draw. I think threw a touchdown right before the half. Like all of these. Yeah, he
did. Yeah.
But this was certainly the most egregious of them all.
The reason I take this tone with the defense is, again, this is what you were supposed to be able to hang your hat on if you're Matt Eberflus. If the offense is going to look like garbage because of the hire that you made in the offseason, if you're going to be putting your number 1 overall pick quarterback into shitty situations over and over again, the offense is going to look bad. That's one thing. If the defense is going to start to fall apart, and I know Kyler Gordon didn't play today. I know Montez Sweat didn't play today. I know Jaquan Brisker didn't play today. Everyone's got injuries, man. Guys are missing all over the place. Missing one defensive end, one nickel corner, and a safety is not the reason that you got run over and over and over again. It was a terrible day for the linebackers. I don't want to make like sweeping proclamations about firings and staff changes and everything else. The last thing I'll say about this, we're heading in a bad direction. The Bears as an organization, the Bears as currently constructed, what they're supposed to accomplish with this staff, it is trending in a very bad way. And we can revisit that as that slide happens. But after this discussion, I think I'm good on Bears talk for a while. This is just one of those moments where, because it was the low moment, I do think of what this staff and this regime has looked like. It deserves to be mentioned. It deserves to be talked about because this was a gross game.
It does. And the last thing I want to mention, I brought up, the discipline culture, all that stuff. We're a buttoned up team at the top of this. The thing that irritated me the most about this was late in the second half, 3rd and 6, 3rd and goal for the Cardinals. They sack Kyler Murray and they get them into 4th down and they get them into field goal. And Javon Dexter commits a penalty where he jumps over the snapper. And so the Cardinals get the ball again and they finish and score a touchdown. Like those are the mistakes that if you're going to, preach yourself as the buttoned up team and we have all this discipline, you cannot make that particular error.
No. And it was a game full of errors. Speaking of games full of errors, another team we wanted to talk about in this segment is the Seattle Seahawks. We can hit this from a variety of different ways, entry points, anything you want to do. I think I'll start with this one. The Seahawks averaged 10.2 yards to go on 3rd down today. 10.2 on 3rd down. That's bad. Actually, the Patriots were worse, which is somehow hard to imagine that a team could be worse than that. But that's the problem with the Seahawks team. If you look at a lot of stats, quick pressures, some like play actions, pass protection stats, they're right there with the Patriots and all of this shit. The Patriots are barely watchable. The Patriots are only a team that you want to pay slight attention to because of Drake Maye. The Seahawks aren't that far away in terms of what they're having to overcome on a down-to-down basis. I can't remember the exact slate of downs and distances that they faced in this game. I tweeted about it, so let me pull it up. At one point on their first 5 possessions, the Seahawks faced a 3rd and 13, a 2nd and 31, a 2nd and 18, and a 3rd and 33. Those were all on different sets of downs. So it's not like they gained it's not whatever. It's not like we had a 2nd and 31. They gained 18 yards and it was 3rd and 13.
Right.
These are different sets of downs. That's what this team is constantly dealing with. And I know the weather was bad again, but to have 2 flub snaps, to do all of the other weird shit they did in this game. And I know they almost won because Geno and JSN did ridiculous shit for a good chunk of this game. Man, this is truly one of the most maddening teams in the NFL when you see what they're capable of and then what they constantly do to themselves.
Yes, and you mentioned the 10.2, what was it, 10.2 yards to go on 3rd down. First of all, if you spike the ball twice on 1st and 2nd down, you would be in a better position than that, which
yes.
Not a great way to run your offense.
It's a great way to put it. I didn't think about that. It's literally true.
Yes. And then second of all, you're doing this you have maybe like one of the worst, like we said, one of the worst pass protection offensive lines in football. Like your interior and your right side of the line is really, really, really bad.
So 80% of the line.
Right, 80%. It's basically everybody outside of Charles Cross. And then especially if Zach Charbonnet isn't in the game to do pass protection for them, it's just really bad.
Their offensive line isn't that bad. It's just the left guard, the center, the right guard, the right tackle, and the back. Other than that, everything is
than that. And like the tight ends aren't very good at it. But it's like whatever. But so like let's say in some fantasy land, Josh Allen and the Bills had a game where they have 10.2 yards to go on 3rd down. It's like, okay, well, they're still a decent pass protection unit, and you have Josh Allen who can just run around and make plays. Geno, for the most part, is a pocket quarterback, and you're sticking him behind the worst pass blocking unit in football. Like, it's just the fact that they got anything out of this game is a miracle. I don't know. This team is just incredibly frustrating. And then they actually moved the ball okay, and then every time they got to the red zone, some type of calamity happened. And Geno obviously threw 2 interceptions. The pick 6, that is fully his fault.
It's an awful throw and an awful decision.
It is a fully egregious error where he gets pressured. He's rolling out to his left. Cam Kinchins is like playing the flat, and he's so tight to the boundary that I think he realizes I don't really need to play like right on the running back who's out in the flat. He realizes, all right, I'll fall off this a little bit. As soon as Geno goes to trigger, he just slides back into the back line, picks that off, somehow runs it back, which is a truly incredible play. The other interception he throws, they're trying to do like a little gun rollout, and they're trying to get AJ Barner just stringing across into the flat across the formation. He kind of gets hemmed up like as soon as he passes like the right tackle mark. Geno Smith throws it as if he's going to be able to keep moving anyway, throws it right past him to a defender. Should Geno dirt that? Maybe. Like if you see your guy getting hemmed up, you probably should just dirt it and kill it. But I understand like why with a guy in his face, he just thinks, he'll get there and he'll figure it out. And it's just like kind of an unlucky just bang, bang play. So it just felt like every single thing that could go wrong for Seattle did go wrong.
They had a 2nd and 31. I'm 100% with you on all of those. Even if he gets hit on the Kinchins pick 6, even if he didn't get hit on that play, that's still going to be a pick. Kinchins reads that the whole way. It's 1st and goal. You cannot throw that ball. And so that one's 100% on him.
Is that it's 1st and goal. Like what you don't have to do this. If it's 3rd and 4th and goal, I get doing something stupid. But 1st and goal, like just throw it away. Throw it out of bounds.
Doesn't have to happen. The Barner one, it's just an unlucky play. I mean, that's just brutal. The first interception he threw, this to me it just sums up everything. 2nd and 31 after another fumbled snap. 2nd and 31. They get a 22-yard chunk to JSN. And on the next play, the ball hits JSN and gets tipped up for an interception. That's it. Like that to me is just this team in a nutshell. The other parts that are just emblematic of where they are. Geno pressured on 59% of his dropbacks in this game. 59%. He was 9 of 19 on those plays. When not pressured in this game, 12 of 15 for 208.
Pretty good when he's not getting killed every single play. And really, 9 for 19 is not that bad when you're getting pressured that much.
That the touchdown they scored at the end of the half, it reminded me a little bit of that touchdown they scored against the Falcons, where there's like 6 seconds left and he just throws an absolute missile shot to get them 6 points. And Geno, I think Beller put it in here. I believe Geno had 6 completions, or 7. Geno had 7 completions of 20+ yards in this game. 7. I mean, and they had 2 called back for holding. He had like a 38-yarder and a 40-yarder to JSN that were called back from holding. So the fact that they made all of these splash plays and the quarterback was able to do, again, 4 or 5 crazy things. I know they threw 3 interceptions, part of the reason they won. But to even be in this game and to eventually lose it because you don't get a 4th and 1 in overtime after the game is essentially being handed back to you because you can't block anybody. Man, they are just so frustrating.
And dude, in overtime on the other side of the ball, when the Rams get the ball, it was either the first or second play that they have, but they're trying to throw a big crosser to the right side to, I think, Ty Johnson. Tariq Woolen is like standing in the spot where the ball is going to be, and he's like waiting for the interception. He's sitting there like a center fielder waiting for the ball to come to him. If he drives 2 yards and runs up to cut off the crosser, it's an interception. Seahawks are instantly in field goal range, game over. But he's just standing there and he lets Ty Johnson cut in front of his face and make the catch. And then like shortly after that, Stafford makes an ungodly throw to
Unbelievable.
Demarcus Robinson. Again, Demarcus Robinson, I'm telling you, he somehow always makes the play. Yeah, and Robinson makes an incredible one-handed catch. So it's just like you fail that 4th and 1 when the game has kind of been gifted to you. And then you have Tariq Woolen just like not drive on a very easy interception. It's just like the game is winnable and you're just not winning it.
And the fact that they didn't win it now is huge in the NFC West race because now the Rams, who felt like they were dead in the water a few weeks ago, are sitting there at 4-4 and a half game back of the Cardinals. But it's not like the Rams were great today. The Rams offense struggled throughout most of this game. We talk about how much Geno struggled against pressure. Stafford was only pressured on 34% of his dropbacks today, according to Next Gen, 3 of 15 on those plays. They had some trouble in pass protection today in ways they didn't against the Vikings. So I don't really know what to make of this Rams performance overall. You know, Puka gets ejected, which I can't believe 2 star players ejected in the early parts of these games today. That's a conversation for another time. Puka gets ejected. You know, that's one more thing that they have to worry about. Now we're back to a slightly diminished version of the offense, but it still wasn't the sort of performance you'd want to see from this Rams team after what they did to the Vikings on Thursday night. And so I don't really know exactly what to make of this moving forward. I just know that this game was very winnable for the Seahawks, and they continue to shoot themselves in the foot, unlike almost any other team in the NFL.
And it's especially, you know what, if the Seahawks didn't look as promising as they did for the first 5 weeks, I probably wouldn't care. If they lost 1 or 2 more of those games and it didn't seem like they could jump in front of the division, probably wouldn't care. But the fact that they gave me hope and then now it's starting to crumble again, it's like, why, man? Why'd you do this to me?
It's twofold. It's the ways they're losing these games are why it's notable. You're snapping the ball over people's heads multiple times a game. You're getting stepped on inside the 5. You're throwing multiple red zone interceptions. That's one of the reasons it's worth talking about. The other reason it's worth talking about is you see what they're capable of. Like You see the plays that this offense can make when the situation is even halfway decent. The problem is it's very rarely halfway decent. So the major takeaway here is that we got some truly grotesque football in that afternoon slate. And that was always going to take up a majority of this segment. I don't totally think the Seahawks should get I don't totally think the Eagles should get a pass. So we're going to get into some of that did you see that right now?
Did you see that? Did you see that?
Let's start with the good.
The
Eagles made 2 of the most insane plays I've ever seen today. Would you like to go through what you saw from the Saquon Barkley play and just how it moved you emotionally?
It's not often you legitimately get to see a thing that I cannot ever recall where Saquon Barkley, first of all, the thing is it starts as like a normal good play, right? Where he catches the ball out to the left, he spins out of one defender, and you start right there. There's not that many backs who can just spin out of tackle. That's cool. He immediately transitions that into like putting his back to a defender and then realizing, oh, the only way I can get around this guy is to just jump over him with my back turned to him. And he
backward
does it.
hurdle.
Yes, it is a backwards hurdle. Like I've truly never seen it before. And you have to be one of the best athletes to ever touch a football to make that kind of play. And it was legitimately like a video game glitch or like something you dreamed of. Like if you wrote this in a movie script or like a show, everyone would be like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And then he did it.
We've talked about this a little bit and alluded to this a little bit. I think there are a few players you can talk about this with, and we'll talk about one in a second. It's been so cool to see, I'm going to say cool twice. It's been so cool to see objectively cool football players be able to do this shit in better circumstances. Like I'm sitting there watching that game today with the Ravens, and it is amazing to me that we have 2 of the coolest players of my lifetime in Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. They showed Derrick Henry's stats and just like where they are in his generation and what he's been. I'm like, Derrick Henry is a legend. Like he's like Paul Bunyan when you think about what he has been as a football player for the last 2 decades. And the fact that we now get to see him as part of this Eagles or this Ravens offense is so great. And I think you can probably say a lot of the same stuff about Saquon Barkley, where he had to wallow away with this Giants team for his entire career. And the Giants had some of the most unwatchable offenses, some of the most unwatchable offensive infrastructure for the last 6 years that he was there that we've seen in the NFL. Like at the bottom of the league pretty much every single year. And now you put him on this Eagles team, and it feels like once a week he does something where it was like, holy shit, did you see what Saquon did in this game? That is awesome. Like I'm very glad that we get to see that version of Saquon Barkley. And he's necessary. With how up and down the Eagles can be and how stop and starty they could be, he's necessary. Other guys that are necessary and how the talent lifts this team is somebody like Devonta Smith, who also made the sort of play today that you see once every 2-3 weeks. If Garrett Wilson hadn't made that play last Thursday, we would be talking about the Devonta Smith touchdown today as maybe the best catch we've seen so far this season.
Especially I thought last week's catch, right, was incredible, where he catches that post, he goes up for it in traffic, puts it on the back line. That's an amazing play that not many receivers can make. For him to do what he did today, where he catches a go ball down the right side at the back of the end zone, he catches it like he's leaning over, so he's like almost parallel to the ground, one-handed, and just like drags both of his toes in on the back line. His ball skills are truly one of the best I've ever seen. And because he's not
go gadget arms.
Yeah, yes, legitimately. And because I think almost all the time when we think of ball skills, we think of the Drake Londons, George Pickens, Mike Evans, these guys who are
big guys.
Big, exactly. But Devonta Smith, just in terms of like find ball, bring ball into my frame and make sure I hold on to it, there's just not many guys who find a way to bring the ball in like him. And again, he's doing this, it's like 180 pounds generously. It just, the ways that he does it are crazy.
I think when we talk about Saquon, just how unique of a talent he is, and the fact that he was the 2nd overall pick in the draft, and you can argue about whether or not that should have happened considering the quarterbacks available in that draft. But I don't think anyone was like, oh yeah, Saquon Barkley is not a top 5 talent. This was about all of the other things that go along with drafting a running back that high. Saquon was so good as a prospect and is so physically gifted that you could talk yourself into why he is worthy of the 2nd overall pick. That's unicorn shit in 2018. Devonta Smith, at his size, at his physical package, one of the most productive college football receivers we have ever seen. The man was the best player in college football. And I guess I forget this in these terms. The fact that we have these historical outliers in certain ways on the same offense in Philadelphia, and seemingly every single week, these dudes that are just in another zip code in terms of how they're built and what they're capable of are doing this stuff consistently.
And even, I know he's not playing right now, but Jordan Mailata, for him to be like 7th round pick who wasn't even playing football, and now he's one of the best left tackles in the league. Like, they just find these unique talents.
And I think and how he says this, I mean, it's unusual is what that he says about late round picks, but that's unusual players. Can we find unusual players? And the fact that AJ Brown, who's like one of the most physically dominant and most physically imposing receivers of his generation, feels like the third or 4th most outlandish physical specimen in his own offense, I think tells you a lot about what this Eagles team is from a talent perspective.
Right. That's the other thing. Like, the other players are just, it's hard to find an analogous player. Whereas you look at AJ Brown and you're like, all right, he's incredible, top 5 receiver. But also like Des Bryant was kind of something like this. Julio Jones has been something like this in certain ways. But like the other guys, I don't know if I've seen another Devonta Smith in terms of the way that he does it.
He's one of one. He truly is one of one. The fact that some of this and all of this might not have mattered because of the decision-making from the Eagles in this game is what is particularly frustrating. I don't know what to do with some of the situational choices being made by the Eagles. A lot of people losing their minds about taking points today. I'm never going to be in that discussion. I don't think, taking points is not always the best answer. When there is incongruity in your decision-making and when you choose to do things and when you do not, that is what is frustrating to me. To have a 4th and inches, not 4th and 1, 4th and inches from the 25-yard line, when you have the most efficient short yardage play we have ever seen in the NFL.
You're the 4th and inches team.
You roll out Jalen Hurts on that play, and he throws a desperation heave, and you turn the ball over on downs. Okay, cool. And then on a 4th and 3 at the 22, you pass up a field goal, and there's a turnover on downs. And I believe they missed a field goal later in the game when we think they might have gone for it. It's just everything about the choices they're making and when they're making them is sort of perplexing right now. And I think that it doesn't matter because of the talent that they have and the fact that they can overcome so much of this, but these frustrations with how they're going about this, even if they're not coming up against teams like the Jags, it may come up against the better teams in the NFC when we get a little bit deeper into this season and the games really, really start to matter.
I think that's pretty much where I'm at with it. Whereas I will say, I think coming into the season, I thought maybe some of that stuff and maybe some of the inconsistencies on what I thought the offensive scheme would be a problem. It turns out when you have a number of the most unique talents at their positions and some of the best players at their positions, and Jalen Hurts actually playing a little bit better than I thought he was going to, turns out none of the other stuff really matters. Again, I think when we get to, you have to see Detroit, potentially in the playoffs, yeah, this stuff is going to matter. But as far as getting there and getting into the dance, maybe the talent is just too much.
Next one here. Did you see the play that Drake made to force overtime and then the scramble that eventually led to that play?
I've seen this play 10 different times from him at North Carolina. It's the thing. It's a miracle that he does this. His ability to extend plays in the red zone where he's just running around, evading 3 or 4 different plays, which he did on this play. He made 3 or 4 different guys miss behind the line of scrimmage. I think Next Gen Stats actually tweeted this. He held the ball for 11.82 seconds on that play. It's the second longest touchdown throw since 2016. And the only one that was longer was the Jaden Daniels Hail Mary from last week, which is like, it's a 3-man rush on a Hail Mary. That doesn't count as much as literally the game is on the line inside of the 5-yard line. Like, it was just, only Drake Maye makes this play, dude. Only he is insane enough to do something like this.
This feels like a potentially good situation for the Patriots, right? If you're a team in this spot, the idea of losing almost every single game, it's not good for the coaching staff. It's not good for people who eventually want to keep their jobs. And I know it's hard to maintain morale and all that stuff. I'm not going to deny that. But if you're just going to put yourself in position to have a top 2 pick in this draft, to have the pick of whatever you want, whichever position you want to go with, and the quarterback looks good consistently and continuously shows promise in arguably the worst circumstances in the NFL, it feels like not a terrible place to be if you're the Patriots, right? The fact that he's doing this and having these moments pretty much every single week, it's not perfect. It's not great. He threw for 200 yards today on 41 attempts. It's not great, but we have these glimpses and these flashes where it's just like, man, if you can surround him with some real pieces, there's a lot to be excited about here. Even if the wins and losses are gruesome right now, I still feel like there's something to hang your hat on with that collection of shit if you are a Patriots fan.
Absolutely. I mean, losing games and getting to a top 3 pick, if they can kind of, like you said, somehow keep the morale good in the building. And honestly, I think if Drake just continues to play this way and these guys feel like he is the guy, like I think Devon Godshaw, who's obviously one of their defensive linemen, he said today, this is young Josh Allen 2.0, which if he were to turn into that obviously is like a 100% outcome for him. But it seems like they're pretty bought in on him. And they should be. Like, everything Drake Maye did on really the 2-minute drive in general was insane. Obviously the final play is crazy, but at one point it's 2nd and 10. He's an empty. He slides up around a pressure, fires a bullet to Kayshon Boutte into tight coverage. The next play, he has to like squirm around in the pocket to make a jumping check down to Ramondre Stevenson. And then right after that, he scrambles and gets the first down. And then he gets a 4th and 2 to Hunter Henry that puts them like inside the 5 where he can then go do whatever it is he did on that last play to tie it. Like that's the moment where, like you said, you're like, okay, maybe we've got one.
The fact that I'm going to be consciously tuning in to Patriots games in the second half of this season, given what their record looks like, is a testament to how interesting Drake Maye is right now. Let's get to the next one here. Did you see Terry McLaurin's touchdown on that sluggo today? Everything about that play was gorgeous. The route was gorgeous. The ball was gorgeous. And this is, again, kind of an offshoot of what we're talking about with Saquon. I was watching games today at a bar in Denver with my buddy from high school who lives here. He's in my fantasy league, and he has Terry McLaurin. And I've had McLaurin like every single year that we've done this league. And this year I was like, I can't anymore. Like, I have to move on from this. He wasn't worth keeping at the price that he was at. And the fact that I now have to watch him do this as someone who has believed deep in his soul that Terry McLaurin was a great NFL player every single year, no matter what the production looked like, I'm torn because there's a personal pain that comes with it. But I'm also just really happy for Terry McLaurin. These guys who get to get out of quarterback jail at some point in their career, and we finally get a sense of what sort of players they really are, that's a beautiful moment. And we are in that renaissance right now with Terry McLaurin.
It is. We need every cool player needs to have this moment. Like, there's inevitably going to be some really good players just locked onto terrible teams, right? Like, that's just the way that it goes in the NFL. It's the way that the NFL draft works. That's naturally just going to happen. For Terry McLaurin to finally have a quarterback who can, one, get him the ball, but two, Jaden Daniels is very willing to throw those, like, all right, those double moves, go balls, whatever. He's like, I know Terry's going to be open. Why wouldn't I go throw that? And so for those two to already have the connection that they have, obviously we saw it against Cincinnati a few weeks ago, but it's only gotten better since then. Like, these two, just in terms of the pure deep ball connection, I feel like this is not going to be the last time Terry McLaurin will be on here for Did You See That?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed watching those two play that two-man game throughout the season, and it is really cool that Terry McLaurin gets these moments after what his quarterback plays look like for most of his career. Last one here. I'm not going to do a jokey way into this because it's serious, and we usually reserve this segment for some of the fun stuff we saw on Sunday, but this is something that absolutely warrants discussion, and we need to hit. Chris Olave, another potential head injury over the middle of the field, carted off, goes to the hospital. This would be his second concussion of the season, concussion. He was checked for a concussion last week, I believe. And I think he's had multiple concussions at other points in his career. So obviously there's been a lot of discussion about Tua and his history and his future based on some of the head injuries that he's had to endure. Chris Olave seems like he's in as bad or worse of a place when you look at his history. And I mean, this is something that feels like it's happening every single week. And there's not really much to say other than it's sad. I mean, it's just truly sad for him and his future. And that's really all that matters. But also, like, he looked like, and still is, like, one of the more dynamic young receivers in the game. And this just felt like the week where we were going to see, all right, here we go, like, wheels up for Chris Olave. And then immediately this happens. And it's the moment, it's scary. And it just is really unfortunate that we've reached this point this early in Chris Olave's career, but it feels like we're probably at a stage where some tough conversations are going to happen.
Yeah, sad is really all there is to it. I mean, 2 years ago, him and Drake London kind of came into the league, burst onto the scene at the same time, and it was like, man, these two same division rival teams, they're both going to, jump onto the stage and be these top 10 receivers. And for Olave, it's purely just been the injuries the concussions specifically that have kept him out of it. But when he's been healthy, he's one of the cleanest route runners you'll ever see, especially for a guy who's his size. Like, he's over 6 foot and is just incredibly graceful. His speed is outstanding. Like, so for him to have some of these issues and not be able to healthily play a full 17 games, it's just frustrating, especially again for a player who is so incredibly promising when he is out there.
Yeah, that game again, I didn't watch a ton of that game. It was on behind me. My brother texted me and he just something about Olave, and I was like, "What happened? Like, something happened?" And then I saw the replay and everything, and I was like, "Man, I cannot believe that." Like, when you consider everything that has happened to that guy this year and just some of the moments he's had to endure, for it to happen again that early in the game, it was almost unbelievable. It was just something that was hard to wrap your head around. And unfortunately, that's kind of the place that we've landed. And we'll revisit that when we know more. And, I'm sure that there will be a lot more discussion about it, but I felt we had to hit that at some point on the show. All right, let's talk about a couple performances today that unfortunately have led to some low moments for a few franchises in the NFL. It's time to revisit It's So Over.
It's over. So over.
We did this early in the season, almost as a joke, right? After it was like week 1 or week 2, we could jokingly look at a team, I think it was the Panthers after week 1, and be like, it's so over. Now that we're at the midway point, we can bring back It's So Over and have it actually mean something. Because for these teams, their season is probably over. The Dolphins fall to 2-6 today after a heartbreaking loss to the Bills, a walk-off 61-yard field goal by Tyler Bass. 2-6, several games back in the division. a few games back in the AFC wildcard, even talking about the underwhelming middle class. Dolphins probably have too big a hill to climb here. I'm pretty comfortable saying it's over for the 2025 Dolphins or 2024 Dolphins. And I don't really know what that means about the 2025 and on Dolphins.
I think they are the most frustrating, it's so over type of team because they're really not that bad. Like the offense actually played pretty well today, like 27 points. Tua had a number of really good throws. Tyreek Hill, especially in the second half, really exploded. Devon Achane is, for however many touches you can give him a game because he's a smaller guy, but like when you can get him the ball, he is truly unbelievable. Like just his speed, his vision, it's truly incredible. And the defense is like a functional unit. But when you're at 2-6, at this point, you're just too far behind the 8 ball. Like you have to basically go 8-1 from this stretch. And like, there's a chance they go, 5-4 or 6-2 or 6-3 or whatever. And they're a functional team, but that's still not going to be enough to get you out of this hole that you've dug yourself. And I know some of that is like Tua goes out with some of the injuries and the offense just completely craters. Maybe you should have a better backup than Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle, which is probably the biggest issue there. You can't necessarily predict that Tua's going to get hurt, but like for the season to have fallen apart the way that it has for them, while still being a kind of functional and scrappy team, I think that's why it feels particularly frustrating for them.
They're 2-6 right now. Let's say, for argument's sake, they finish 6-11. Okay, so that means they would go 4-5 the rest of the way, which I don't think is crazy. If Tua stays healthy, I think that they are that kind of team. They almost beat the Bills today. I think that there is a chance that they're like a 500-ish team, maybe even a little bit better. So let's say 6-11 or 7-10. If they finish 6-11 or 7-10, if you are Stephen Ross, does Mike McDaniel come back next year?
I mean, I honestly think that he might not, and I think there's a couple of factors that kind of compound on themselves. First of all, obviously you go 6-11, your job is probably always going to be on the table. But the other thing is this roster is pretty expensive and pretty old. Like, so it feels like this version of things is just run out. And if you feel like obviously Ramsey is expensive and old, Tyreek Hill is expensive and old, Teron Armstead, there's a number of guys that I'm probably forgetting. But a lot of your guys, like I said, and you just paid your quarterback. So like this roster is already kind of maxed out for what it could be. And so I would understand why if they think, okay, if 6-11 is all we're getting out of this year, maybe we don't want to give the head coach like the chance to fully rebuild it because maybe that's just like it's going to be too weird of a timeline. So I still think McDaniel is actually a good coach, but I understand why just like the timeline of things and how everything is falling apart, that there's a chance that it's 6-11, he might not be there next year.
If this were almost any other situation, I would understand people being like, I don't know, this is what we should do moving forward. Here's why I think it actually would make sense to bring him back. There is no offensive system that you could run that would make your quarterback, the quarterback that you just paid $53 million a year, more valuable than the offense that Mike McDaniel is going to run. So if you decide, because you didn't reach the goals that you wanted to, that it's time to start over with the coach, I know the roster is aging a little bit, but if you hit the reset button, you still have the $53 million quarterback in this next iteration of the roster. And if you're not maximizing that player, you're probably going to fall short of your goals anyway. So I think trying to see what you can get out of this group for at least one more shot, because they can bring back most of this roster next year. It is expensive, but they've done a lot of maneuvering. They've done a lot of restructuring. They can probably do it one more time and get away with it and say, this is the best chance to get the most out of Tua and this collection of players because Tua's skill set is best utilized within this sort of offense. I understand that argument, and I actually think I buy into that argument. I don't know if the Dolphins are in better shape or better positioned next year, no matter who you bring in as your head coach and your coaching staff, than the one they have right now because of the way they've built and oriented this entire thing.
Unless they totally bottom out from here on out, which, again, I actually think they're like a scrappy functional team, so I don't think that's going to happen. I pretty much agree with you because I think you're either going to end up in the spot where you end up running an offense that is not as good for Tua. This is assuming you replace Mike McDaniel. Or you get 4 weeks into the season and realize, I think we have to just run some facsimile of what the old Mike McDaniel offense was. And at that point, it's like, well, we should have just kept the guy and we should just kept him in the building and prayed that he could put it together again. So I think there is a chance that they could just run it back, assuming, again, it doesn't completely bottom out. And I don't think it will. So I think they should still bring him back, but you can never know where an owner is thinking if you go 6-11 or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I know people are going to say that he just signed a contract extension in 2024. You think Stephen Ross is worried about that?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think that Stephen Ross probably has enough money to pay Mike McDaniel and one other coach. If this goes really bad, I wouldn't be surprised if we start having that discussion. I don't think that we should jump to that conversation, though, because of the circumstances and kind of the considerations that we talked about. Their inability to run an NFL offense with anyone other than Tua is a problem, and I do think it's something that they should get in front of in the future. But I don't think it's necessarily an indictment of what this team looks like with its quarterback. That there are real reasons why I think they can't do anything when he's not in there. And I think it's a couple different things. One, what he does as a ball handler and just some of the machinations of how the offense works, having somebody that is skilled in that regard, but is also used to doing that is really important for the Dolphins offense to be what it is. You've seen that over each of the last 2 weeks. And the other thing that I always come back to, I talked to Frank Smith before the season about something, and I've alluded to this in this conversation a couple times, but we were talking about why Tua is able to kind of rip those throws over the field. And it's this ingrained trust in the fact that it's going to be there. And that trust is gained over dozens and dozens and dozens of reps throughout training camp. You're throwing balls before guys are open. And the only reason you're willing to do that is because you've had extended time on task with this coaching staff and you've built inherent belief in what they're asking you to do. So you're going to make decisions that are living on the edge in a way a quarterback that just dropped into this situation is never going to be willing to make. So I do think there are actual tangible reasons for why the offense falls off a cliff when their starting quarterback isn't playing. Whether or not you should build an offense that's fragile is an entirely different discussion, but I understand how you arrive at that point.
Right. I think it's both. Like, this is probably not the best way to build an offense, but they've gotten the most out of the guys that they have, which I think is pretty impressive. And then you make the good point that, like, Tua, again, whether it's the best way to play the position, he is always going to fire throws, especially over the middle of the field in that offense. He's going to trust that they're going to be there. You could see what the other quarterbacks, and again, they're not very good quarterbacks to begin with, but those guys, they just didn't have the full confidence in where and when those throws were supposed to hit. And that's why it felt not as consistent, not as good.
Yeah. I think that the answer is probably to bring this group back and see what happens, because it does give you the highest ceiling. But to be 2-6 and for this to be a lost season, it's a tough place to be halfway through the year. Next one here. I guess I'm going to pose this to you. And I think I know what your answer is, but the Cowboys now are 3-5 after losing to the Falcons today. Is it over? Is it so over with the Cowboys?
It's over, especially Dak Prescott left about halfway through this game, especially if he's not going to be fully healthy for the rest of the year, potentially. It is extremely over because what have I said on almost every other time that we've brought up the Cowboys? It's like the only thing holding this team together is Dak throwing quick game and CD getting 2 explosive plays for you a game. That's the only thing holding this thing together. Okay, well, if you pull out the quarterback from the equation, all you have is CD's explosive plays, and if the quarterback plays and is good, we might not even get those. So, like, I think it is pretty over for this team, and we felt this coming even when they were in a 500 team, right? Like, we felt when they were 3-3, this team is not very legit. They're a little bit fraudulent, and now 2 weeks later, it feels very much that's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, the gap between them and what this Falcons team feels like. We talked about that a little bit on the Thursday preview show, on the Friday preview show, just where the Falcons are and what the Cowboys would need to do to get to be that level of offense. And you could just feel the chasm between those two teams today. And just even some of like the design stuff. The Falcons offense wasn't great down to down. They didn't run over this Cowboys defense like other teams have, but there were so many easy completions available in high leverage moments. Like the Darnell Mooney touchdown is a perfect example, but there is a gap between where this Cowboys team is and where even, let's call them, good NFL offenses are. What feels like a good NFL offense. You feel the gap between those two groups right now. And for the Cowboys to be there with their quarterback, with CeeDee Lamb, and with what we've seen in stretches from this offense over the last couple of years, man, that is a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, like, I think the Darnell Mooney touchdown, I think it was a 4th and 3 in the middle of the second quarter. They're running bunch to the right side. And this to me is like how they're just this Cowboys team does not have it together right now. Trayvon Diggs is playing as like the high player over the bunch. And Darnell Mooney like runs that wheel route out to the right side. I know as the high player over the bunch, he's had to work through the traffic and get out to that wheel route before. I know he's done it. He's a good player. He's a Pro Bowl level player, but he just takes his angle so low and runs himself right into the traffic of the other two players. And Darnell Mooney is just walking into the end zone. It's like, if these are the kind of simpler mistakes that we're making 9 weeks into the season, how could this be a serious unit? And the thing I thought that this unit would have, even with some of the player struggles, some of the personnel issues, I was like, man, the Mike Zimmer defense, they'll at least be well coached. Even that doesn't feel very true right now. And so for them to like, it just doesn't seem almost any of the good outcomes that we could have got for this roster have happened. Like it's been almost all of the worst outcomes everywhere.
We're going to have a long time to have these discussions. I don't think this is similar to the Mike McDaniel thing. The Mike in Dallas is over. I mean, they're going to move on at the end of this year, and they're going to figure out what the next regime looks like. We don't have to spend 15 minutes fixing the Cowboys right now. We're going to have a lot of time between now and New Year's to have that discussion. So we will revisit that at the proper moment. We are going to talk a little bit more about Darnell Mooney before we get out of here. It's time for what we learned today.
You know, I think I've learned something today.
We like to wrap up all these Sunday night shows with just a little lesson you took away from the weekend. I'm going to let you kick this off because it's an extension of the discussion we were just having about the Falcons.
Yeah, it is. And I think this is like almost a grander discussion about how well the Falcons are coaching their offense. But to me, Darnell Mooney is kind of a reminder of how important the pecking order and like your role within an offense matters specifically for skill players. I remember maybe 2-3 years ago when Darnell Mooney was in Chicago and he was their best pass catcher. I was like, man, this is not a way to run an NFL offense. Like he's just too inconsistent with his hands. This is not a guy that you can feed that many targets to. His route running can be a little all over the place. Now you get him into Atlanta, where to me, he is your fourth most valuable pass catcher. You have Drake London, who's incredible. Kyle Pitts, I think, is a weapon, even though the production can be up and down sometimes. And then Bijan Robinson out of the backfield is like insane whenever they get him out of the ball. So now Mooney has jumped down from being the most important guy in the offense. Now you're the fourth most important threat. So it's easier to scheme up plays for him that make more sense with other guys taking some of the bigger roles. And like you can kind of limit when his targets are supposed to happen. And you can really hone in on the routes he's good at rather than, hey, you're our best player. We need you to run all the important routes. And so I just think all of that has kind of made sense why he's had truly a career year in Atlanta. And he's playing really, really well right now. And I think this is just kind of a testament to all that stuff.
I'd argue that Darnell Mooney is a more important, better pass catcher right now than probably Kyle Pitts is for this offense.
He might be actually.
I again, the idea of Kyle Pitts is intriguing, and you had those moments against Tampa. But watching what Darnell Mooney is doing, I mean, the production is obviously impressive, but what he's doing on like a down-to-down basis, it was early in the game today. It was in the first or second drive, and he just cooks on another one of those. I think it was a post corner stop, and his ability to really, really hurt people on those vertical stem outside the numbers routes, whether it's like a blaze out or a comeback, the vertical speed that he has combined with his ability to throttle down, that's a real weapon within that offense. And then you combine that, like you said, with what Drake London is. I know London got banged up today, but we know Drake London is, what Bijan Robinson is. The entire collection of pass catchers and the complementary skill sets that they have, it's what makes this offense so fun to watch. And I think a staff that has a decent idea of how to deploy all of these guys, that's what you feel when you watch this Falcons team play. And I think the Darnell Mooney aspect of it has quietly been one of the reasons that the Falcons have been such a compelling group the entire year.
They really have been. I mean, he's their guy who gives them some stretch in the offense, right? Like the running back can only give you so much stretch out of the backfield. But then Kyle Pitts is like, he can run, but like he hasn't been as much of a vertical presence as we thought. And then Drake London is usually, again, working under the 15 yards area. So like Mooney has been their guy that gives them that vertical presence. And he's done it about as well as you could hope.
Yeah, I guess Darnell Mooney applies to the Terry McLaurin conversation about getting saved from a terrible situation, looking like a completely different player. God, that hurts my soul. Mine today, the lesson that I learned watching this slate of games, it's something we've touched on a little bit, but I think that really was apparent when you watch the Ravens offense and the Lions offense. Continuity is so important. when you get to the NFL, when you think about the trajectory of some of these teams. It was the irony is that I was having this discussion with Kirk Cousins before the season. We're talking about how pocket quarterbacks really develop into the best versions of themselves a little bit later in their careers, right? Like they age very well. And he was talking to me about how he kind of lamented the fact that he was never able to work with the same play caller for a huge chunk of his career. You know, it was a couple years here, it was a couple years there. Somebody gets fired. He leaves Washington. Sean McVay gets hired to be the head coach of the Rams. Kevin Stefanski gets hired to be the head coach of the Browns. So every couple of years, he's cycling between offensive play callers. And every year, he seeks out conversations with like Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And I think that if you look at those guys, it lays bare how different Kirk Cousins' career is compared to somebody like Tom Brady, who worked with like 2 offensive coordinators his entire career. Sean Payton, who worked with Sean Payton, or Drew Brees, who worked with Sean Payton his entire career. And you look at teams like the Ravens and the Lions, and they don't have 10 years together, but you feel how much the continuity with the quarterback and the play caller matters for these offenses. With the Ravens, it's only year 1 to year 2, but the comfort level with who Lamar is with Todd Monken heading into his second season, it matters so much. You feel just how different his handle of everything is and how much control he has within the system. And then you go to Detroit, and we've talked about this, how in almost any other scenario, Ben Johnson would be a head coach somewhere. Because he isn't, the Lions are interested in such a different position than so many teams at this point in their timeline. They've been able to build and build and build and build. And I just think that Jared Goff, and again, I talked with him about this during training camp, just the conversation and the dialogue that he's having with Ben Johnson consistently and what that relationship is like. There's just such an understanding all the time of we're doing this because this is what we're trying to accomplish. We're doing this because this is what we're trying to accomplish. The entire offense understands what the plays are designed to do and what they're trying to get out of them. And you feel that so consistently. They understand situationally what they want out of everything they're trying to do. And that only happens because you're able to build that over time. So if you can hang on to the right offensive play caller and you can pair that with the right quarterback, you see results down the line. And I think that there are examples on the other side, right? Washington's been really good in year 1. Cousins has been good with Zach Robinson. But when you have these pairings and these relationships and these partnerships, that's what they are. They're partnerships. When they're really allowed to grow, that's when you see the special stuff start to emerge. And I think that that's what we're seeing in Baltimore, even in year 2. And I absolutely think that's what we're seeing in Detroit now that these guys have had a long time to work together.
Absolutely. I think you can be a good offense, right? Or when you just like kind of jump into it year 1 and you're just putting stuff together. I mean, the Ravens last year, Lamar won the MVP, but they weren't like a great offense overall. It was really only when we jumped into year 2 like this, where it's like, okay, Lamar now can take over more of the pre-snap stuff. We have more answers for the blitz. Lamar Jackson is more comfortable in a pass-heavy, spread-heavy offense where he's throwing the ball more and having to read out the field a little bit more than he ever really did with Greg Roman. Just getting more comfortable with that stuff goes such a long way where you feel like you know where the answers are. And I think that's really the value that you get out of being able to be in the same system for 2, 3, 4 years, is that you just know when things break, you know exactly where you got to fix it. And you know how to like pre-fix things before they even become a problem. And that's why, you know, we mentioned earlier, Jared Goff has started 4 games where he's completed at least 10 passes. It's because they know where all the little tricks and all the answers are for everything that a defense is going to try to throw at him. And they've perfected their ability to get ahead in games. And you can only really do that when you've played together for 3 years now, the way that the Lions have. I mean, you go look at Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Obviously,
it's a perfect example.
They're 2 of the best to ever do it. And part of the reason is that now it's been, 5 years or whatever it is, even without not like, they just don't have very good pass catching talent right now. It doesn't matter because Andy Reid is giving him enough answers and Patrick Mahomes is consistently finding him in a way that it's kind of hard to do if you haven't, been in the system and lived and breathed it for 5-6 years. And so I think with just what you're seeing, kind of like you've said, at the very tippy top of the sport, you see a lot of teams and a lot of offenses that have been together and worked together for a long time.
Even the staffs. I mean, the fact that staff has mostly been intact. They've been able to work with the same guys. That staff offensively hasn't been picked over. They have a lot of the same voices and a lot of the same collaboration. The play that I go back to, that touchdown or the wheel route to the league play to Tucker Kraft last week, where the Packers are literally drawing that up on the sideline because it wasn't in the game plan because all of these guys have worked together for so long. Jason Vrabel and Mike or Adam Stenavich, their offensive coordinator, who was their offensive line coach. When you can have that, and it's knowing where the bodies are buried. These guys know where the bodies are buried because they've worked together for so long. And that is such a huge advantage. And I do think, again, we've seen examples on the other side in the regular season so far. I think when you get into the playoffs, that's where this shit really, really matters, because you know where your weaknesses are. You know where you're going to be vulnerable. You know where teams are going to try to attack you and how to potentially account for it, because you've had the time on task and you had to do it already. So I think that even if this is fun and we're seeing the Ravens offense crush and we're seeing the Lions offense do this, there's a chance we may not have even seen where this is going to end up mattering the most.
That's what I'm really ready for. When in the playoffs, you got to catch Spags on a bye week. That's when this all really starts to matter. All
right. That is all we've got for today. Sincerely appreciate you guys listening. We will be back with our midweek show. We're going to be releasing the midweek show just a little bit later this week, just so you guys know. Typically, we do it on Tuesday evenings because we record early on Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday is the trade deadline, which I've been doing this for 10, 12 years, full time. I forget about the trade deadline every single year. So the fact that Michael Beller exists is a very nice moment for me here, as we have to figure out how to program the show around the trade deadline. So we're going to push that show back a little bit. It's going to be coming out overnight into Wednesday so we can react to whatever happens at the trade deadline. God, I hope we see some fun stuff. I really, really hope we see some fun stuff. If not, I'm going to be super bummed. All right. That is all we got. Sincerely appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back later this week. Talk to you soon.